Hi, everyone. Welcome to the International Waters Network webinar on water justice and the commons. We have a really great event coming to you today, direct from Barcelona. And I'm just going to ask you to hold on, and we'll be starting in just 2 or 3 minutes. Thank you for joining us today. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the International Waters Network webinar. Really outstanding panel and a number of speakers coming to you today direct from Barcelona. So we're going to get started in just 1 or 2, 3 minutes. So please hold on, and we will be starting shortly. Thank you. All right, everyone, it's 3:01 here, and I just wanted to welcome everyone to the International Waters Network webinar on water justice in the commons, and that's the subject of a new book that has been edited by our first group of speakers, and we have a really great event lined up for you today, covering not only the editors of the new book, but many individual presentations, all based on the same theme, and we'll have a chance for discussion at the end. I'd like to introduce, before this, we have quite a long event, but I'll just introduce and say the names of everyone who will be presenting today, and then I'm sure that they'll be introducing themselves as well. So we have Tom Perrault from the Maxwell School at Syracuse University, Bilbana Diorte and Ricard Bolins at Wageningen, Jean Alier at University of Barcelona, Isabel Villa from the Pontifical University in Peru, Hug Corbilla at the University of Cordoba, Daniel Del Bine from the University of Barcelona, Sergey Vallomayor Tames from University of Barcelona, Fabio Castro at the University of Amsterdam, and Jeroen Vos from Wageningen University. Many, if not all, these scholars are members of the Justica Heridica, the Water Justice Alliance, which is a group that the International Waters has partnered with on a lot of projects in the past, and who focus on unraveling mechanisms of water accumulation and conflicts and supporting vulnerable water groups, with particular focus on Latin America. So we're really excited to be able to partner with them again on this really great project, and to be able to present to you both the editors of this new book that's very exciting, as well as many presenters who are working on similar issues. So I think there'll be all interesting things that everyone here will be really excited about. So before we start, I just want to remind you of who we are. The International Waters Network is a unique partnership with a really multifaceted approach where we promote collaborative and comparative research on urban water resilience, foster knowledge mobilization through academic and policy dialogues in our network and beyond, just like this very event. And we're building on an extensive network of expertise to just help enrich the capacity and graduate training at all of our partner universities and institutions. We have just a number of different schools that have come together and NGOs, including the University of British Columbia, the University of Minnesota, the University of Western Cape, IEG Delft, WaterNet, Justice Costa Rica, the New Partnership for Africa's Development, Saatchi Waters, Forum for Policy Dialogue on Water Conflicts in India, Wizards University, and the Pontificia Catholic University of Peru. Today, we're all here to talk about water justice in the commons, and I'm sure you know there's been a lot of ongoing interest in commons-related scholarship recently, whether it's in the traditional commons of like a shared natural resource like a field, or more modern creations like Wikipedia. However, since most of traditional commons scholarship does not focus well on justice issues, today's panel will be focusing on exploring hidden questions of justice in the commons. This is a little bit of an unusual event for us in terms of format, so let me just briefly discuss what we'll be doing. For the first hour, we have presentations by the book editors, and then there'll be a short break, and then we'll have shorter presentations afterwards for the next hour, and then there'll be a discussion following all this. I know this will be a long watch, but settle back and get yourself some coffee or water and enjoy the event. Now, if you have any questions, we've been discussing with our organizers in Barcelona that they just pose your questions on the YouTube channel, and hopefully they will be able to read it and pose your questions to our panel live in Barcelona. Remember that you do need to be logged into your Google account to pose the question on YouTube, but you should be able to see the box for conversation. It's right below the main video and to the right. So if you have any questions, you can just pose them there. And we're very excited to see you and have you with us today. With that, I will turn you over to our event organizers in Barcelona.
On small-scale artisanal main mining and water justice by Giselle Vila Benitez from the School of Geography at the University of Melbourne. Then a presentation on water remunicipalization in Catalonia by Miriam Planas from Ingeniería Sin Fronteras and Agua es Vida. A presentation by Daniela Del Bene here from ICTA on dam building conflicts and environmental justice. And then a presentation by myself, Sergio Villamayor, also from ICTA, on environmental justice movements and the commons. And then Fabio de Castro from Subtly, University of Amsterdam, will moderate a hopefully very interesting discussion. As you know, the seminar is being live broadcasted via the International Waters YouTube channel, so we may have questions from the other side too. And so without further delay, we'll give the floor to Tom Crow.
Great. Thank you, Sergio. And I'd like to just begin by thanking Sergio for all of his work in organizing this and bringing people together, and with the technology, just setting all of this up. And of course, thanks to Rupert and to Jeroen and to everyone else who's part of the Justicia Hídrica network. And thank you to those of you who are here in person, especially those of you who trekked all the way across Barcelona from Lhasa and are missing sessions this afternoon. So thank you. And todo el público que está por todo el mundo, pues. So I am just going to very briefly present the book. Aquí está. Okay, thank you. I don't really have a presentation that is sort of about water justice I have a presentation that's about water justice, the book. So what I'm going to do, just in really basic terms, is sort of present what we just did. So this just came out with Cambridge University Press. Rucher and Jeroen and myself, I guess it was a work of about 2 years putting this together. And I'm just going to talk very, very briefly about sort of the motivation and how we conceptualized the book, and then a little bit about just the structure of the book and some things like that. And then if there are questions about the book and some of the topics or whatnot, then we can cover those. I think some of the more substantive kind of conceptual issues will be addressed in the presentations and in the discussion and in the questions that we have following. So I don't have that kind of presentation. But we decided to do the book as part of the Justicia Hídrica water justice series of books, which are up here. There are how many books now altogether?
26.
26 books, and so this would be the latest, and there are more that are coming in the pipeline. So this is one of many books that is part of this large international network. So most of you, I'm assuming, who are here and who are viewing online are familiar with the Water Justice Network. I know Rupert is going to talk about that, and Viviana are going to talk about the Water Justice Network. But it's a large network of people sort of around the world, based in Europe, particularly in Wageningen, here in Barcelona, a few of us in the United States, but not very many, and then a lot of folks in Latin America, and a few sort of sprinkled in other parts. And much of the work, certainly most of the work that I've been involved with, has been focused in Latin America, and with a strong Andean focus, not exclusively, but with a strong Andean focus, which is where I work and where Jeroen and Rucher works, and a lot of you all. This book is a little bit different in that it is, first of all, it's in English rather than in Spanish, which makes it more accessible to some audiences, less accessible to others, right? So there's a trade-off. But one of the things that this book does that the others haven't done as much is focus, kind of shift the focus a little bit from Latin America to cases of water justice and water struggles in many parts of the world. So there are cases for sure from Latin America. There are also cases from North America, from Canada, in particular from Europe, from Africa and South Asia. So there's a bit broader, more global perspective. There are a total of 19 chapters in all. So it's about the same size as some of the others in terms of the numbers of chapters. And we organized it in several different sections, each of which has an introductory essay. So I'm not going to go through all the list of chapters, but what I will do is talk a little bit about the way that we've organized the book, which will give you an idea for the themes of how we brought these ideas together, which in turn will give you an idea for how we're conceptualizing water justice. So we begin with an introduction, which I should say is available. So for those of you here in the room, there are copies here if you'd like to just pick up one of the introduction chapters. There also is the chapter 6, which I'll get to in a second. Those two are available up here in hard copy. They're also available online. So if anybody's interested in those, you can have those for free. So the first, there's an introduction which sort of lays out how we conceptualize water justice sort of in a conceptual theoretical way, right? Where our ideas about water justice are coming from, how those intersect with other theories of justice, and then how we bring those to bear directly on themes of water and struggles, social struggles over water. The first section following the introduction is repoliticizing water allocation. So the focus there is on access and allocation to water, and really thinking about the politics of how water is allocated. And this has sections from various parts of the world, including Africa, South Asia, and the US, or Europe, sorry. The second is hydrosocial depatterning and recomposition. So thinking about the ways in which flows of knowledge work to kind of constitute forms of power, how those are struggled and reconfigured through social movements around water. And so again, this has has chapters focused on Latin America, on Guatemala, in Colombia, and in the Andes. Yeah. The third chapter, or the third section, sorry, is exclusion and struggles for co-decision. So co-decision, thinking about water governance, the ways in which people participate or not in forms of decision-making around water, water allocation, water access, and rights. So this has chapters on indigenous peoples in water allocation in Canada. It has chapters about water sanitation in Africa, the right to water movement in Europe. So questions about participation, who gets to decide, who doesn't get to decide, what are the terms through which, the political terms and the social terms through which decisions are made. And then, let me see, I think this is the final section. The final section is governmentality, discourses, and struggles over imaginaries and water knowledge. So this goes a little bit beyond the institutional structures of water governance to the forms of knowledge, to the social imaginaries around water. And this has a section on governmentality, on how water is known. It has a section on various forms of politics and policy and the forms of knowledge that go into informing that. Has a chapter on memory and the ways in which memory informs, memories of the past inform social justice struggles of the present around water, and questions around gender and gendered subjectivities for water access. And then we end with a conclusion chapter. As I said, there are two chapters that are available if people would like it. One is the introduction, which is called the multiple challenges and layers of water justice struggles. So that's available. And then another one is a chapter by Eric Svenedal and Rucher, and it's called "And Not a Single Injustice Remains: Hydro-Territorial Colonization and Techno-Political Transformation in Spain." Right? So there's a fantastic set of authors, some people like Eric Svenedal, Karen Backer, and others who are Francis Cleaver, people who are really well known, others who are much younger scholars doing fantastic work in various parts of the world. So I would invite those of you who are here to pick up the free chapters, and I'm just going to leave it there and see if there are questions about the structure of the book, about the motivations, about the ideas behind the book, and then we can turn it over to Rupert and Viviana. Algo? Nada. Por favor.
Are you going to translate it?
Yes, good question. We are, in fact, it is in process. So yes, it is going to be, the book is in the process of being translated. We have a fantastic translator who is based in Lima, who's working on the book right now. And our hope, our plan, is that it will be published by the Centro Bartolomé de las Casas in Cusco. We're still waiting on some of the, there are some contractual issues, as one would imagine, between the CBC and Cambridge, but those it's just technical stuff, so we need to iron those out. And so the book will come out in Spanish in Latin America. Do you know, do we have a target date, do you know?
End 2019.
Okay, end of 2019?
We hope.
I would hope sooner than that, but yeah.
We are sure.
Yeah, it will be out. So yes, it is being translated. Well, thank you. Save your questions for other, and we'll have lots of time. We had people on the schedule for presenting. Not everybody was able to show up. So we're going to have a lot of time for discussion, questions, things like that. So thank you again, everybody, for coming here. We're thrilled that you're here, and we're looking forward to the discussion. Thanks.
Well, thank you very much, Tom.
for your introduction and the presentation of the book. Thank you, Sergio, for organizing this whole session. Also thanks to ICTA for hosting us here, the International Waters Alliance for broadcasting the whole event, and all you who are here. It's a pleasure to be again here in Barcelona with ICTA. What I'm going to do is very briefly introduce the series of Justicia Hídrica, so that after that Abyayala can introduce the 3 new books that have been published this year. Yeah, so apart from the Water Justice book with Cambridge University Press, which was presented by Tom, there are 3 more books in Spanish, also published this year, and those form part of the Justicia Hídrica series. What is Justicia Hídrica? It's an alliance, it's an open alliance of all those scholars, students, organizations who are interested, committed to a cause that's related to changing water injustices wherever in the world. Each according to their own approach and philosophy, but we share, let's say, something in common, and that's that there is large-scale injustice at this moment happening in many, many places around the world. So we're publishing on that, we are investigating it, we are teaching on that, and that we do within, let's say, a multi-action alliance. We've got 3 basic activities. One is research, both academic research and action research, participatory action research. It's one domain of our studies, of our activities. The other one is capacity building, training, especially, let's say, of movement leaders, for example, but most of all of young scholars, young researchers. We do that in Latin America, most of all. Each year at Bartolomé Casas in Cusco, there is a large course of 3 weeks in which young scholars, young teachers, young researchers get training on how to understand injustices and water rights and water struggles in Latin America. And the third activity is related to how to translate this to action, to policies. And most of all, what we there want to do is not so much listen to what policymakers say, but listen to what movements say, listen to what grassroots do. How do they tackle the problems of large-scale injustices? This alliance is open, everybody can join. We've got a website also. And let's say with respect to the activities we do, everybody can join either, let's say, in research or in the training or in the debates, be it online, be it in presence, wherever you are. There are 3 main questions we have in the Alliance, which are presented in all the books, in all the studies. 3 basic issues. The one is about accumulation. How is water power, water-related power being accumulated by the few, and how do the most of the others suffer from that? How does it work? We want to understand the mechanisms of accumulation, water rights, and understand it along gender lines, along class lines, ethnic lines, and other power imbalances. The second issue we want to investigate in the Alliance and in the books is the issue of conflicts. Not just conflicts, open conflicts, but also especially the hidden conflicts, the subtle conflicts. How do conflicts play out? Those conflicts that relate to that accumulation of water and water-related power. How to understand those conflicts beyond just the open conflicts, and see how the major contradictions in society cause those conflicts. Contradictions related, as I said, to gender, to class, to ethnicity, and so on. So how underneath those open conflicts there is much more to investigate. And the third line of investigation research is, okay, the responses by grassroots societies, by civil action groups, how do they respond to conflicts and accumulation. We have got in the book series, thematic studies. For example, main themes are extractive industries, agro-export, business, agribusiness. Hydropower is an important issue. Contamination and pollution, related, for example, to mining. Very urgent also the issue of groundwater theft. Very often those conflicts are invisible, so important for our studies. The new policies related to market environmentalism. How are those policies like payment for environmental services presented as the new silver bullet? Yeah. How are they affecting especially the marginalized groups? Few studies are done on that. And finally, hydro-social territorial transformations. How do all those processes of extractivism, of new policies, how do they relate to the transformation of territories, how to understand territories? Later in the debate, we're going to talk more about it, and what we want to understand in particular is how the new megacities, how do they absorb the water, and how does it often come from rural areas, focused on, let's say, led by beautiful discourses, like, for example, human right to water, payment for environmental services, but how do even those beautiful discourses relate to extractivism, relate to getting the water from the rural areas to the cities? In all those elements, in all those thematic areas, we always look again for, okay, how is water being accumulated? How do conflicts, contradictions relate to that? And what are the responses? There is a number of books, like the Water Justice book, that Tom just presented, which are not, let's say, directly in the series of Agua y Sociedad, Justicia Hídrica. Those are with other publishers, for example, Cambridge University Press, for example, Routledge, for example, different local publishers. But what we also have, let's say, and that is the series we are going to present now, a series that is composed of books. We've got now number 26 already, 26 books. They are published in a series together with Plural in Bolivia, together with Abyayala in Ecuador, together with IAP, Instituto de Estudios Peruanos in Peru, and together with CBC, also in Cusco, Peru. So it's an alliance, let's say, of publishers in Latin America. These are all Spanish titles, and the last 3 of them are going to be launched today. And for that, I give the floor to Viviana.
Yep. Well, this was the first book of the Water Justice Alliance, and it collects many countries and case studies on water policies and practices, and it also lays the theoretical conceptual groundwork of the Alliance. So several books followed and were based on studies and outcomes of the yearly international water international research meetings. And for example, Water Industries in the Andes is edited by Patricia Urteaga. Another edited volume is this one, Agua y Equidad. It's examining the relations between water struggles and livelihoods. The next one is a composed multi-author book, and the main theme is understanding the many layers of water injustice and societal contradictions in water governance. And it's edited by Erkarish, Luther Bullens, and Francisco Penny. And the following book is about water grabbing. It's edited again by Alina Arroyo and Luther Bullens, and case studies deals with agribusiness, water accumulation, mining water extractivism, and hydropower. And the 5th volume is written by Jaime Hogester as a monograph and concerns local, provincial, and national social movements for water justice in Ecuador. Tom Perot has edited the next collective book on mining interventions, water encroachment and pollution, and social justice in the Andes. So, Tom, what can you tell us about this?
It's awesome and you should buy it. And the price just doubled. I mean, just really in breve. So this is a book that's a comparison between Bolivia and Ecuador. So it's half of the cases are water justice in Bolivia, and half the cases are water justice struggles in not in Ecuador, I'm sorry, in Peru. So it's Peru and Bolivia. And the reason why I did that is because I'm working in Bolivia. I've been working on questions of mining and water and social justice in Bolivia. And I have had students and colleagues who have been working in Peru on very similar kinds of issues. But the contexts are quite different. And unfortunately, because of the sort of global political economies of publishing and the way that publishing works in Latin America, there's very little academic work that comes out of Bolivia that's available in Peru, and very little academic work that's available in Peru that's made in Peru that is available in Bolivia. And so what happens is there's not a lot of conversation between activists and scholars and social movements between the countries that don't go through the global north. And so what I wanted to do was publish a book of cases from both countries and then co-publish it. So this book is co-published with the Centro Bartolomé Casas in Cusco, and also Pierre, which is the Programa de Investigación Estratégica de Bolivia in La Paz. And so it's co-published by the two publishers in both countries at the same time, with the thanks to Justicia, so that it has authors. There are authors from all over the place, including Colombia and the United States, and Peru and Bolivia, of course, but with cases from both. So is that great enough? Okay. And it's awesome.
So water justice are part of the academic field of political ecology. Therefore, Cristina Jakub, myself, and Joseph Bullets have edited this book. And now, Cristina, let me give you the floor to briefly explain the importance and fundamental idea of this
It's just the main difference from this book, the other ones from the series is just in this book we focused on extractivism, and of course we were talking about water and through the political ecology approach. But our main idea was to try to understand what was happening in different countries through Latin America, specifically Bolivia, Peru, Ecuador, Colombia, and Mexico. And in this case, we contacted some scholars. I mean, we didn't extract the cases from a meeting as the others, but we wanted to just specify the differences and similitudes between the controversial disputes or the hidden battles that they are in extractivism. And for that reason, we divide the book in 3 sections. One is focusing on agribusinesses, the second one focusing oil and mining industries, and the last one in hydropower. And we made a special effort in try to see what movements don't know, but why some movements are really well known and others just not that much, because especially in extractivism, in mining, and in hydropower, there are some very well-known cases where people are just arise, but others they are not, like in agribusinesses. So we made an effort in this book to try to conceptualize this. So,
thank you, Cristina. Just printed the new book edited by Alina Arroyo and Edgar Ish. It deals with political interventions, governance reforms, and different water policies models, such as payment for environmental services, mega hydraulic infrastructure development, and how they trigger inequalities in the local water worlds. So capitalist transformation of hydrosocial territories and rural water, injustice relationships are other key themes of this book. Water governance was printed in 2016, and it's edited by myself, Cristina, and Jaime Hogester. And through different case studies, we analyze the concept of water governance. We argue the importance to approach it from the power relations instead of harmonic agreements between the actors. Nevertheless, we recognize that these concepts give the opportunity to examine how actors bargain and build the process of water governance. And the last book just published and launched today, it is not only big in size, but also in content and also in deep approaches. And it is edited by Giselle Villa and Cristobal Bonelli, and gives deep insight in water conflicts and water movements. So Giselle, can you tell us about this inspiring book?
So in English, this book might be translated as counterflow, and it represents the particular stance that we adopted as editors of this book, which means that we wanted to highlight a type of scholarly work that is not precisely scholarly, but activist-driven and grassroots-driven. So the particular added value of this book is that it's wild and it's messy. But we believe, both Priscilla and me, that from this messiness we can learn some lessons about how to theorize from below, trying to forbid this idea that we have as scholars to present these theoretical corpuses that constrain how we understand reality and allowing reality to inform us to develop our new theoretical concepts. So here you will find a wide variety of case studies from the grassroots, and I highly encourage you to buy it.
Okay, so hereby we close this Justicia Hídrica books presentation, and now the word is to Abyayala, in representation of Joanne.
No, I think we can take a break.
Okay, so now we're going to take a break.
Yeah, so I think we can do 5 to 10 minutes break. It hasn't been that intensive yet. Well, stay around.
Hi, everyone. You can see that our first session has been wrapped up in Barcelona, and they're taking themselves a short 10-minute break. So I suggest you do the same. You can use this as an opportunity to go charge up and get some more coffee, or to just think and reflect about some of the issues and topics that we were just discussing in the sessions. So come back in 10 minutes and we'll have the next session. Thank you for joining us today. Everyone, just a quick reminder that the event is currently taking a quick break, and we will be coming back to you in just a few minutes with our next group of short presentations. Thank you for joining us today, and we are looking forward to having some more presentations and follow-up discussion at the end. Thank you very much for joining us today. Hi, everyone. Just a quick reminder that indeed we are still on a little break with organizers in Barcelona, and we'll be getting back to you in just a few minutes with the next set of presentations. And we're looking forward to having you. And you can take yourself a little break and have some coffee. It looks like they're having a glass of water over there. So please come back and join us in a few minutes. Looking forward to continuing the discussion. Thank you. just want to remind you that you're watching the International Waters Network of the Commons in Barcelona, and we will be getting right back to it in a few minutes. They're currently taking a short break for the next round of presentations. But go ahead and thank you for joining us. Hi, everyone. Just wanted to welcome you to the International Waters Network webinar on water justice and the commons. We just had a really great set of speakers for the first 45 minutes, and now we are taking a short break, and we will be right back at it quite soon, and with our next group of speakers. So please just hold on and take a little break with us, and we'll be right back ready for you in a few minutes. Thank you.
Okay, let's continue the session. We've had now several presentations, and what I understand is, let's say, have the presentations one after the other, and after that there's ample room for discussion. So we just have a series of intervention presentations, and Well, after that, welcome all the critiques, remarks, questions, and so on. I'm going to briefly talk a little bit about the concepts around water justice, justicia hídrica. There are many ways to conceptualize it. I only will touch upon particular issues. There are many other focuses, ways of seeing it, and they're all welcome. This is some of the ideas we have developed in the Justicia Hídrica Alliance, also together with environmental justice networks and so on. 4 domains I want to touch upon, which are basic to understanding, studying, struggling for our water justice. The first domain of studies and of action is the issue of distribution, redistribution, socio-economic justice, injustice. There is the main issue, the struggle for the right to equality, how to have more equality in water distribution, water governance. A second domain, which you also will recognize in the environmental justice movement, is not the struggle for the right to equality, but the struggle for the right to be different, which seems to be opposite to it, but it is not. It's a paradox, not a contradiction, as Fouts would say. It's the domain of cultural justice, misrecognition, discrimination, the issue of recognition. David Strasberg, Nancy Fraser have worked on this a lot. A third domain you also will recognize is the issue of participation, representational justice. And there we are working on the struggle for governance participation. Why are particular groups always excluded from co-deciding in water governance? And then a fourth domain, the issue of not just this generation of nature, of people, but also future generations. The issue of sustainability, socio-ecological integrity. How to create, maintain intergenerational balance within water governance and water management. The issue of water justice always obviously will touch upon the issues, the main buzzwords in water governance, integrated water management sciences. Efficiency, sustainability, rationality. All laws, all textbooks, all manuals will talk about these 3 main concepts. Well, we deal with them in the Justicia Hídrica Alliance as powerful myths. And they are creating their own ideas, their own reality, their own water world. They are very powerful. They are being used in every document, in every policy. So what we want to do there is to scrutinize, to understand if they are so powerful. But if they are an illusion, what is the power of illusion? How to understand this illusion? How to scrutinize? How to tackle this illusion? Because you cannot just say it's nothing. Participation, it's not done. No, it's done. But how is it done? Efficiency, it's made. But how is it made? Sustainability, rationality, whose rationality? So main question, for example, how is water scarcity constructed? Politically constructed. Just as water abundance, overabundance, how is it being politically constructed in reality? And who does so? How can power and the power dimensions of truth claims, of those things which are held to be truth, how can they be understood? How can the ideas of development, development rationality, how can they be understood and narrated? And how then to associate it to other knowledge bodies? Knowledge bodies, for example, of activist movements, of grassroots movements. How do they claim for their own truths? How do they claim for their own ways of working on water? How do activists work on water? But those 4 main elements or domains of socio-economic inequality, cultural misrecognition, political exclusion, and socio-ecological destruction, they relate to demands of society, they relate to demands of scholars, of students, of activists, and so on. Those interconnected fields of water injustice, they are being understood through disciplinary, interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary studies struggling for water justice. I want to touch upon 4 themes, and there are many more, 4 themes that we in our studies on water justice see as crucial. The first one is the political economy of water grabbing, water intervention, water development. The second one is legal pluralism, the whole issue of the cultural politics of water rights and identities. The third one is governmentality, governmentalization, and hydro-social territories. And the fourth one is the struggles, the movements, the struggles for water justice. To start with the first one, what we see and how we see water is always, let's say, water as a politically contested resource. Water is not a neutral resource, it's not H2O. If you work on water, you work on power. If you work on the distribution of water, you will take it from somebody and you will give it to another group. Governments do so, enterprises do so, researchers do so. So it's always a politically contested issue. Water flows in the direction of power. For example, Grain here in Barcelona, they have investigated water grabbing in the Nile Basin. In the last few years, they calculated that 10 million hectares have been bought by foreign investors from China, Saudi Arabia, India, and so on, many countries, buying the lands over there, which is called land grabbing. But obviously, land grabbing doesn't mean anything without water grabbing, because all those lands in the Nile Basin, they can only be interesting for companies to invest in if they also get the water rights. And very often, those are things which are not in the contracts in the big letters, but in the small letters. So what Grain said, this is hydrological suicide, because those 10 million hectares that are being grabbed in the Nile Basin, they will need more water than is available in the whole basin itself. So what are we talking about? Just an example. If we talk about water grabbing and if we talk about water conflicts are not just, let's say, about the water resource itself. That's one layer. The conflict over the resources. Resources like water, resources like water-related infrastructure, money, the land, irrigated land, and so on. That's one basic layer of struggles in which obviously there's a need for much investigation, and much research is being done already on that level. But at another level, more abstract, it's not about the liquid water, about the material water, it's about the intellectual water, it's about the paper water, it's about the rules, the rights, the contents of what does it mean to have a water right. So the conflict over the rules, over the laws. Those laws, obviously, they relate to how water is being distributed in practice. Then at the third level, we see the conflict over authority and legitimacy. Who has the power to make those laws? Who has the power to make those water rights? Who has the power to make those rules? Is it the government? Is it the market? Is it the community? Is it the male head of household, for example? So the authority, the struggle for authority to make rules that again distribute the water. And then at the fourth most abstract level, there's a conflict over worldviews, ideologies around water. The conflict over discourses, how discourses that present a total picture of how the world should look like. Should the market organize water management? Should the government do it? Should the community do it? And so on. And the second element, main issue we work on is legal pluralism, the existence of different rights systems in one and the same social political area, overlaying each other, interacting with each other, also contradicting each other, and how do those different rights systems, normative repertoires, how do they create new rights systems that are being practiced in reality. The issue of power there comes in, obviously, the issue of culture comes in, the issue of history comes in, how are water rights being created, how are water-related identities being created. And we see there that indeed it's not just the normative framework of the state, the water law, that determines how water is being managed. Not just the water law of the community, or not just the water law of the market, but that users use a variety of normative sources in order to make their own legal pie, in order to make their own local water law. And this relates obviously to an issue that is very, very complicated for governments for bureaucrats, for enterprises, they want a level playing field. But if we really recognize that there's legal pluralism and that the people that are managing and making their own water laws, it means that every community has a different law. Every community has different practices. Every community is different in terms of its norms and how to understand and how to work on water. So this is a major headache for bureaucrats, governments, and the market. And so easily all those local, legally plural rights are being seen as spoiling water systems. They're inefficient, they're irrational, they're not modern, they're anti-modern, and they should be normalized. Yeah, because the abnormal should become normal. Yeah, they should be modernized. And all those irrational systems should be rationalized. So one of the major endeavors, the major projects now going on is the formalization of local water rights. In name, to protect local indigenous peasant water rights, in practice, in order to bring them under state and market control. Order at the one hand, chaos on the other hand. So we should bring order in chaos. In this field, therefore, questions, very important questions we have are the worldviews, institutions, the values, the knowledges. Some are being considered illegitimate because they are formal, and why do they automatically relate to making illegal, illegitimate all the others? Why are they denied existence? And obviously, if you are denied existence, you also do not get the benefits, the material water rights and so on. So the third domain of water justice studies we do is related to governmentality, to governmentalization, to how to bring them under control, how to shape territories in such a way that they fit market, fit government, fit official demands. Well, as you all know, territories are not those bounded natural spaces which are being presented very often in the technical studies. They are being naturalized, they're being made natural by humans. And also water scarcity problems, water scarcity solutions, water overabundance problems, water overabundance solutions are being made natural. But in fact, territories are humanized nature. Yeah, they relate to infrastructure that's being seen as hardened morality, as some authors say, or materialized power. So the fundamental question in those territorial studies is, how are power and resource being distributed? How can territories be seen as trying to express political power, organized power among humans to distribute resources and decision-making power? One fundamental issue we study there is hydrosocial territories. It's the puzzle of how to see how water flows and water infrastructure connects people, resources, ideas, ideologies, through technical arrangements, institutional arrangements, cultural practices, and so on. So how to shape a territory, how to make a territory, both, let's say, as an imaginary idea, as well as how to bring that imaginary idea into practice. And obviously, there are different ways of how to do so. Dominant groups have other ideas of how to shape hydrosocial territory than marginalized groups. So there's an overlap of how engineers understand territoriality, how governments see territoriality, how indigenous people see territoriality, how scholars see territoriality, and not always the basin, the river basin, is the natural unit. It's a natural unit because we've made it natural. It does not exist in practice as such. All those ideas of territoriality conflict, and if we see what is the outcome in practice, we can see how power relations are working in society. If we see what is the expression of territoriality in reality, then we can understand power among humans. Governmentality, therefore, is how to organize people, nature, artifacts, identities, how to shape people, how to shape production, how to shape the rules in such a way that they, as an outcome, are those territories that are understandable, exploitable, and controllable. How can we do away with all those irrational territories invented by the people or by those multiple peoples? Yeah, and how can we replace them by territory that are understandable? The issue of governmentality. So for that, very important is we've done many studies also here, case studies on local communities, local irrigation societies, local drinking water systems, local micro watersheds, and so on. But as Foucault also once said, visibility is a trap, and subjection by illumination. So the more we illuminate illegal practices, the more disempowered they may become. So let's shift the focus also on power. Let's look at where the power comes from. How does it work? So most of the studies do not need to be done maybe in the field itself. They can also be done in the offices where power comes from. Fourth domain, water justice struggles. People organize wherever in the world in order to think of counter-conducts, to go against those oppressive hyper-social territories, governmentality ideas, those water governance frameworks that are invented, let's say, by the ruling groups. At different scales, in different ways, and very often it may be in the streets, like in Cochabamba, the water war and so on. What we read in the newspapers are the open conflicts, the open struggles, but what we do not read in the newspapers are the thousands of undercurrent struggles which happen in every community in order to defend their own water rights, their own norms, their own organizational forms that go against formality. They're invisible, they're very difficult to see, but they may be the biggest water struggles going on, and not the open struggles that are being presented in the newspapers. So under-Tau resistance, dealing with non-conformity, of not being conform. In the end, water justice, as we try to study it, is going beyond those universal expressions, universal laws, beyond the official representations, and look at water justice from a relational, comparative perspective. How do people experience water injustice? How do people feel and see water injustice in practice, and how to learn from that as the starting point? Then go beyond all those market, state-organized water justice frameworks, which you can find wherever in the textbooks and so on, in the manuals, and look at, and go beyond those justice studies that say how it should be. Let's see how it is, how injustice works at this moment. There are justice frameworks, there are injustice frameworks that are being embedded, culturally embedded, constructed in everyday practices. They are being politically enforced, so let's learn from them. Justice as a process, not just as an outcome, not just as a shackle that should be organized in that way. No, how does justice work as a process? And then coming back to those four domains of water injustice, the right to cultural difference, the right to distributive equality, the right to governance participation, and the right to socio-ecological integrity. Those four domains, they are being studied both in science, both in scholarly studies, as well as they being struggled for in the movements themselves. So those are just some conceptual issues. There are many more, but some basic issues we want to understand better. And we are far from understanding everything, but it's an effort, it's a struggle, it's a process. Thank you very much.
What a way to end your presentation.
Thank you for the invitation and thanks to the organizers of this event. Today I'll be sharing with you some thoughts about how the water justice research agenda could move forward integrating new research subjects. Specifically, I'm talking about the case of artisanal and small-scale mining in the world. Actually, it's not really a new subject. Some researchers of the network, and I'm thinking about Tom Pearl here, have already addressed this issue. However, it still remains somewhat overshadowed by other types of resource extraction, activities that righteously call the attention of the researchers of the network. Surely, water grabbing and eco-territorial violent transformations propelled by large-scale mining, agribusiness, dams, and unequal drinking water allocation, among others, should still be addressed by the network to unveil the multiple dynamics of this concession. I understand that this is important, not only as a research agenda, but as a crucial link between academia and activism. Still, I find particularly challenging that another set of activities that also threaten a fair and just access and use to water remains somewhat under-theorized. I'm thinking about the impact of urban untreated wastewater in the global south, for instance. The consequences of desalinization in coastal communities is another example. A third one could be the impact of tourism in rivers and lakes, among many others. However, the topic that strikes me the most is the so-called artisanal and small-scale mining. Highlighted here because of the large scholarship around the pernicious consequences of extractivism over water and human bodies and territories. Although the environmental and social impacts of these activities are just as damaging as those of its large-scale counterpart, it seems to me that it has not received equal attention. Just a snapshot of why this is important. According to the latest report of the Intergovernmental Forum of Mining, Mineral, Metals, and Sustainable Development, commonly known as IGF, published in 2017, at least 70% of small-scale miners in the world are informal. A workforce that accounts for approximately 150 million people in the global south. This creates a lot of jobs and a lot of income for poor livelihoods. These people are responsible, among other minerals, of 20% of the global gold supply. Informal mining prevails in countries with high inequality and limited access to state services. The miners themselves integrate a complex working network under neglectable conditions and are easy prey of illegal groups. Mercury pollution is another of the hardest impacts of this activity. According to the Environmental Protection Agency of the United States, artisanal and small-scale gold mining specifically releases 400 metric tons of airborne elemental mercury per year. Water bodies are also damaged when placer mining is developed. It radically transforms landscapes, producing territorial conflicts over use and access of land and water. And also, it impacts the health of humans and non-humans living downstream who depend on water ecologies. I argue that one of the dimensions that hamper this analysis is the identity fix, by which I mean that there is a specific ecological identity salient in the literature about the struggles for water equity. The underlying narrative in this scholarship highlights the cases of communities that oppose large-scale interventions that threat their environment and socioeconomic conditions. Martinez Olier famously presented the joining of both ecological and socio-economic drivers behind the defense of the commons as the ecologism of the poor. While this approach remains true, it cannot explain the cases where the poor and dispossessed are part of the production of extraction and at the same time are victims of pollution and dispossession. The Water Justice Scholarship masterfully identifies the subjects responsible of dispossession processes, such as corporate mining enterprises, agribusiness firms, the state, et al. These are understood as important cases due to the scale of their interventions and their capacity to massively disrupt socio-ecological systems. The theory that builds upon this consequently highlights the role of struggle as a binary, where people usually take stances for or against the activity. This literature then addresses the reluctance of societies to accept these interventions. And this is true, and it happens, and I agree. However, the type of mining which I'm addressing posits a subtle challenge. So-called artisanal and small-scale mining is a relatively new term that attempts to encapsulate the highly heterogeneous conditions of certain type of mining, which has been characterized as limited in mechanization, intensive in labor, capital dispersed, alarmingly informal, and with serious environmental impacts. The different set of criteria included in this definition mirrors the wildly different understandings of mining for different governments, for different international cooperation agencies, donors, miners themselves, and I will add, academia. There is not a single standard definition to understand what artisanal and small-scale mining is, and I believe that this is obscuring and obliterating the debate about how we should approach this phenomenon. We are attracted to the scale idea, thinking that they are small and therefore maybe not important. However, the scale of their impacts is actually important, not only because they have environmental and social consequences, hard impacts on the environment, but also because it coexists with this apparently paradox. It generates pollution, yet it generates income. It hampers, it damages the environment, yet it allows some families to live. And not only some families, 150 million people around the world. So it is a complex scenario. These miners are usually portrayed as illegal, and their association in complex labor chain, and their associations in complex labor chains are reduced under the shadow of criminality. It's a common narrative around the world, in South America, in Africa, in Asia. This understanding, however, shadows the inequality inherent in these mining sites and the general political economy and histories that frame artisanal mining work. Under the agrariization processes fueled by the impact of structural reforms, migration from rural to extractive zones becomes a seasonal activity that complements other income-making dynamics. Seasonality is also driven by impoverishment and the protection after conflict, and by changing climate patterns that limit agricultural planification. It is worth discussing if these findings are exclusive of seasonality in mining, or if they occur as well in the relations between all the sectors. As Coombs and Barham asserted in a paper in 1997, when reflecting on the multiple roles fulfilled within Amazon households, it is inaccurate to fix people's identities and income-making activities to the resources they extract. So what we have in current policy making and in some academia analysis as well is that miners are understood as miners only. Agriculture workforce is understood only as peasants. And we are lacking the link where peasants, miners, fishermen, and extractors can do all these activities throughout the year, even in some cases throughout the same day. So it's unfair to categorize them under a single sector and as the responsible people of certain outcomes of the works of that sector, because the lack of this understanding, of this joining understanding, precludes us to see that pollution, the hard consequences in environmental, social impacts that come from doing this type of mining are also a result of poverty, are also a result of exclusion, are also a result of inequality and oppression. Analyzing this type of mining is not easy. When discussing mining struggles, the water justice literature attempts to fix the bodies and identities of those who pollute and hamper against the dispossessed and the poor. In the so-called artisanal and small-scale mining, however, those identities usually coincide within the same body. The miner that extracts is usually one of the first victims of pollution. The rivers that are mined are usually those where miners and their families dwell and settle their livelihoods. Leaving this understanding behind also damages the struggle of the dispossessed to support their livelihoods and their right to clean living. Taking, for instance, the case of indigenous people who work in artisanal mining in India, Indonesia, Papua New Guinea, Peru, Brazil, Colombia, and many other cases. Well, these are some of the countries where they work in artisanal mining under terrible conditions. Yes, indigenous people mine too. They are miners. However, the narrative of the good savage usually represents indigenous people only as defenders of the environment and their territories. It eludes the very common cases where they mine in their territories to defend them from foreign invasors. Here, mining is also a tool to defend lands and autonomy. as well as an activity to improve household income. It alludes the case of the poor who mine because of the lack of choice under conditions of large impoverishment. Of course, an easy answer is to frame these workers as illegal, as most state responses do, or to render them as victims of illegal networks, as some scholarship does. In both cases, the agency of the miner is neglected. It is difficult to understand how the polluter and the victim could coexist within the same being. I believe that a possible way to understand this problem is to change the scale of the analysis and displace these identity fields. And I believe that water justice can provide a really interesting theoretical framework to understand this case. Understanding that water is a hybrid construction, the hydrological processes is put under question, right? And the scholarship represented in the hydrosocial cycle by Swingedow et al. Has put this understanding as a common arena. But although the social intervention in the hydrological cycle is discussed, the same does not happen with the cycle idea. Here I'm borrowing on Tom's scholarship. What could articulate with the hydrosocial cycle? It is hinted that power relation over politics divides flows, but in fact, the cycle dynamic could even obscure materials and representations that are accumulated, as the case, for instance, of artisanal gold mining in the Amazon evidences water flows are redirected where the gold lays, producing water accumulation along the watershed, and even within specific social groups. While the hydrosocial cycle is a powerful construct to address water's nature and political environment, a view on the dynamics of accumulation is necessary. If we change the scale of analysis and stop seeing only the miners responsible of certain activities and start addressing the way that the global commodity chains are studied, we could understand that the accumulation processes are contingent to the way that capital flows are directed, and the way that the cost of the extraction and the ways the costs of extraction leaves certain communities under poor conditions. So informal workforce, illegal workforce, is a nest, a new frontier where capitalist accumulation could be developed, and a new frontier where accumulation can happen. So this is a call to ask you to see and try to understand under my lenses that perhaps it is necessary to change the scale of the analysis, to stop seeing only the case study and perhaps just start seeing the chain. I think Jerome Bowles' work on fluxes and water fluids and remind me, Jerome, I forgot the specific name. But virtual water. Yes, it is a really good cue to understand how it's important to understand extractivist activities not only as situated in a certain place, but as part of a global flow. And well, that's the case that I'm going to bring. So, thank you.
Hello, my name is Miriam. I work for Engineering Without Borders here in Barcelona. Running the water campaign, mainly working in Barcelona and Catalonia. And I'm going to talk to you about the work that we do, participating in the platform Aguas Vida, that is mainly regarding the municipalization in Catalonia and Spain. Just a quick introduction of the work that we do also in the Spanish state. We work with the Water Public Network, which was created in 2012, and it gathers together movements, platforms from all over the territory. And we participate from Aguas Vida with Ecologistas en Acción and other movements from all the territory, ordinary actions. And also to coordinate the fights from the local level to the state level and fight back to the threats that we receive. And regarding Abyayala, we have different participants in the platform, with labor associations, ecologists, and solidarity associations as IWSB, as Engineering Without Borders. Unions are also part of the platform, and more than 50 organizations, also local platforms from all the territory of Catalonia, working in more quality issues regarding water ecosystems, no? Water framework directive issues, no? Take care of the ecosystem. More local fights from Plataforma en Defensa del Ebre, maybe you have heard about it, or other organizations. And the idea of the platform was to gather together all these fights around the territory and have a common speaker, no? To make to have a common voice in the territory. And then we have these two lines of work: the water, public water, which is the one I'm going to talk today, and the municipalization, and the other one about the local fights regarding water quality, which I'm not expert about that, so I'm going to skip it. We always start the presentations with this slide, because for us it's very important to show that the situation we live in Catalonia is very different from the situations that we live regarding public and private water all around the world. No? If we start watching, water is public in 90% of the world, more or less, and private in 10% of the situations. But in Catalonia and Europe it's 80-30, 70-30. In Spain it's 50-50, and then we come to Catalonia and we have 80% private, more than 80% private, and less than 20% public. So this takes us a lot of time to realize that this was the situation here. In Engineering Without Borders, we started working all over the world, studying what was happening with water in other places, to finally come to Barcelona and find out that Aguas de Barcelona was established here. But then finally we realized, so we started this campaign based here. And water in Catalonia and Spain is municipal, so it has concessions to every city, in every city, or public, but that's not the main situation here. So we started doing, once after we suffered the two biggest privatizations in Catalonia, we decided to start asking every municipality what was the situation. We have 900 municipalities in Catalonia, so we send a letter to each municipality asking for questions: which type of water management you have, public or private, when does the concession end, if it's private, which company is running it, and how many cuts of water do you have in your village, in your city, because of affordability, of families who cannot pay for that. So with that information, the information we received, we built the maps of water in Catalonia, which are one of the most accurate databases that we have still nowadays, 3 years later, to show what's happening in Catalonia with water. No? And then we use it to explain a lot of things that theory tells us, no? Like where the companies are, which companies are, where the power is. It helps us to explain where the power is and how the power is working. So if we look at this map, which is regarding municipalities, which one have public management and which has private, in blue, public, it seems that more or less we have the same, no? Public and private. But when we look into population, then the public disappears, no? The blue disappears, and we see that the private gets all the biggest cities with more population density, that it's the places where they can take more profit. And then they leave all the small villages, no? All these small villages can be public because there's no business there. The second map is about water corporations. Here we have a lot of colors because it's the name of water companies. But when we see the name of water corporations, then we see that mainly it's one corporation working in Catalonia, having more than 70% of the population supply. Yeah. And that was the Barcelona from Suez Group and that. So we have an informal monopoly, which means a lot of power for this company, was all the information about the concessions, where they ending, how the systems are working, and on the other side, we have villages and cities which have no information. As the last map shows, that is the map about water cutoffs, where all the cities and municipalities which are in gray or transparent, they didn't give us data. This is from 2014 when we sent the letter, and they couldn't answer the question on how many water cutoffs back in 2014. So in the middle of the crisis, they had in their cities, and how many people was having the water cut. They just didn't know, and many of them told us, why don't you ask the water company that they have that information? So that's like a summary of how privatization of water in Catalonia has taken all the capacities from the municipalities to really not only manage the water, but also know and have the data of what's happening with the water in the city. So for us, that is the goal, and that is the challenge that we have. And the last question was when the contracts were expiring, when the concessions were ending. And what we found out was that from these 900 municipalities, about 100 contracts were about to expire between 2015 and 2025. So that opened a window to be able to work on recover the water during this period. But the challenge is how to build capacities, not only into municipalities and public partners, but also into population. No? How to make people aware of this issue. Nobody knows. Nobody in Barcelona, even most of the people doesn't know that Aguas de Barcelona is private. So that's something that you really, is it private? I thought it was public. So it's really not perceived as a conflict, no. But on the other side, they are taking so much profit, especially from Barcelona. So I'm going to try to explain quickly two cases: Terrassa, which is the biggest municipalization so far in Catalonia, and Barcelona, which is the biggest challenge that we have. For the moment, from 2010, we have 17 municipalizations, which most of them are from very small cities and villages. The biggest is Terrassa, with 200,000 inhabitants. So, and it's been going on. It's a process, as we say, because it's been a long fight. But among that, we also have many citizen platforms that have been settled up into all the territory and during this time. And more that are not here. We have recently created also a citizen platform, a table from the River Llobregat, and also something in the so I cannot update it, but there's been little by little citizen platforms working on. So from Terrassa, the most important. After 75 years of one contract with this private company participated from AGBA, the contract expired. City councillors voted for municipalization, even though the company has bring the decision to court. So there's been a lot of opposition from the company. Also, they are not giving the data. There's been a lot of campaign of disaccreditation. They have used all the power to maintain the contract, because there is this feeling, this perception that the water contracts concessions are from them, not from this company, and that is what they feel in Terrassa, and we are seeing that in Barcelona. In Terrassa, it has already passed, and they are bringing the water the public water company with citizen participation, and an observatory from that they are building with citizens. But in Barcelona, we have started this year to build a citizen platform, because in 2010 it was discovered that in Barcelona there was no formal contract between the private company and the city. So in Barcelona, 2010, and a court says that the company didn't provide the contract when it was asked for. So 2012, a public-private partnership was made, in a very regular way, with no tendering process, with insufficient technical data, probably made by the private company, not by the public partner. And in 2016, the Supreme Court of Catalonia canceled the contract. So now we are expecting a decision from Spain, and we have a window of opportunity to recover back. So what we've decided is to start a citizen campaign in Barcelona. We try to raise up, we collected signatures for a referendum, not binding referendum, which was rejected by the plenary, because very funny, well, not funny, but really complex, really political situation, I think, because it was rejected not only from the supporters of the private company, but also from the extreme left. So it's quite interesting. But the campaign follows. Tomorrow we have the third assembly from people. No, we are having like 60 to 100 people coming to the assemblies, but it's quite difficult to raise up and explain why is there a problem in all the power that this company has, in all the millions that they are taking every year from Barcelona to do all their businesses around the world. And also we have the strategies that, and all the power, no, there's like the power is totally unbalanced, no, and they are using all the strategies they can in Barcelona with media campaigns, defamation, criminalization, and also going to the state, trying to change laws at the state level. They are trying everything, because if the battle in Barcelona, if Alvar goes down in Barcelona, it's quite important for them and for Suez. So some conclusions, just what's been working here and what's been very, very interesting is the building alliance between our civil society, water operators, and cities, which are the ones that are making it possible for remunicipalization, because there are cities who want to remunicipalize in Catalonia, but they have it very difficult because of the judicial processes and all the power that the company has. It's not only a matter of no private, but also to build new models of public management, taking into account the people, and trying to build observatories and new ways of including people's participation, but also trying to include this into the water policies at municipal level, the limits of the ecosystem that it's feeding the cities, that are feeding the cities. So the idea of municipalization, I can prepare a presentation more to reflect on that, but I think it's interesting to reflect on what is the concept of municipalization. There are people who's working on that, trying to relate municipalization also to a territory, participation, and new ways of public management. And and for us, the biggest challenge now is this strength disequilibrium that we are facing to try to change the situation.
This was your contribution, Tom.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you very much, Sergio and Rujens and others for putting up this nice session. And it's meant to share with you all these thoughts and challenges and unresolved questions. My name is Abyayala, and I'm also based here in Edicta, working with a group on environmental justice and environmental ecological conflict. Actually, my own trajectory comes from the water movements, so more from an activist perspective, so in my home country in Italy. And then when I moved here and I entered the university, so I tried to engage also with the academic debates, of course. And I continued working on the topic of hydropower. And actually what I found is that, I found it like an interesting ground to put together debates on different sectors. So not only water, but also expanding this debate and touching on energy and on food productions or land uses, etc. So yeah, I'll move across these three sectors in this short presentation. And I thought one interesting dimension of the struggles against big hydropower plants is the transformational dimension that movements create. Grassroots movements, but also transnational networks. So, and this is an ongoing debate, so I thought that might be one entry point to discuss this. So I put the second title, which is From Resistance Against Renewables Extractivism to Energy Sovereignty Projects. And let's first say that conflicts over hydropower dams are nothing new. We have lots of examples from the 50s, from the 60s, and here have some of them. At that time, the discourse was more on development, the building of the nation, modernity again, and the alleviation of poverty. But what we see today is that we sort of have a new boom of hydropower construction after a lull in the 90s and early 2000s. And here, this is a map from colleagues in Germany and other colleagues from 2014. They went through all the available databases on hydropower plants under construction and plants, and this is the result. So they looked at dams under construction and dams planned and foreseen or projected to be operational within the next 10 to 20 years. And here we see the new hotspots of hydropower in the upcoming years. So let's put attention, for example, in the Andean region, in the La Plata and Amazon basin in Brazil, the Balkans and Turkey, and then the Himalayan range, of course, India, Nepal, and northern Pakistan, etc., and Southeast Asia, and the Yangtze basin in China. So these will be the next hotspots for hydropower construction. One shift that we can see in the discourses of hydropower promoters is from development, building the nation, alleviation of poverty, to this consensus on sustainability, again, the discourse on sustainability. The transition to renewable energy, that is not a good question, of course. The clean energy, climate-friendly technology, green economy, and also the closing the gap of the access to electricity. Nobody would contest this, right? So, and here we see that companies are also framed as new superheroes, like in this case in Canada, and hydropower promoters defending the idea that, yes, we did errors and mistakes in the past, and mismanagements, but we can still have a better hydro for the future. So this is a process of justification of this new boom. But we also see that dams are bringing along lots of violence. The hydropower projects are among the most, those that register a higher intensity in terms of repression of local communities and movements. And so like a pattern of repression that has been defined as epidemic by, for example, Victoria Corpus, the UN Special Rapporteur on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. And so my intention in this short presentation is to present you like the results of 2 lines of research that we're having here at ICTA. One is how can we, let's say, move beyond a single case study and try to have a more comparative or global analysis of incidences or trends, patterns around, in this case, hydropower infrastructures, and to how we can see, analyze, understand transformation. So this is when we saw the map before about the new hotspots of hydropower, then this is a map of the hidden conflicts that often stay behind these bigger endeavors. Some are very well known, but some have very little information in the website, very little information also from local environmental groups. So we did this effort of trying to contact as much as we can national organizations or local organizations, scholars, researchers, journalists, and put together this database using the EJ Atlas that many of you, I'm sure, know about. So, well, you can find it in the EJ Atlas website. These are some examples of people who unfortunately got assassinated for their opposition to this event. So this is one of the results of an analysis that we did of the database that we could put together, 220 cases. And we see, for example, here, we looked at these 4 categories: repression, criminalization, violence, so direct violence against targeted people, and assassinations. And we see that if we look at the old database, repression is the most recurrent, followed by criminalization, violent targeting of specific people, and assassinations. However, when we disaggregate the data, we see a different trend. We see that in non-indigenous territories, criminalization is the most recurrent, so criminalization comes first, followed by repression, violent targeting, and assassinations. But if we look at indigenous territories where indigenous peoples are involved, repression increases significantly and becomes the most frequent one, and is followed by violent targeting, criminalization, and assassinations. And in both cases, the rate of yeah, okay, that's it for another. So another thing that we saw is that if we look at the forms of mobilization that people deploy, we can see these 3 figures, these 3 features that we can highlight: the non-violence resistance, as also Richard highlighted before, the building of alliances, which is super important, and the proposals of alternatives. We can think that, okay, yeah, obviously, you have to create alliances and you have to propose alternatives. But this is not so taken for granted, because it's a lot of work. I mean, all of us involved in activist work, we know how hard it is to build alliances and to put up like alternative proposals. And so the question was like, many times the debate is like, okay, but if we have to resist a project, we don't have the time to build alliances with the people from far away, and we don't have the time to put together like coherent, and like well-structured proposals. So sometimes the critique. So the situation is used by the proponents, saying, but you're not bringing up any alternative proposals. So what else do you want? So we try to go a little bit further I look into this transformational forces of the movements we are more close to. And in my case, I try to work with a group in India, the Mandavacho Angolan, and collectives in the Himalayas, and in Brazil with the MADI. I'm sure many of you know the movement dos Aprendidos por Barragem. And well, I went with them and with other collectives also from Latin America, and these are 2 or 3 points that I wish to highlight in the 2 minutes that I have left. One is the effort to work across the sectors, so to work with the food and land use on water and energy, saying none of this, I mean, these elements, these sectors are all interrelated. We have to focus and expand our alliances, saying that they are not commodities. So there's a huge effort in scaling out, not only scaling up, as we discussed before, but also scaling out in order to respond to the land grabbing, water grabbing, energy grabbing that hydropower provokes, in order to build like a response to this sovereignty grabbing and build other forms of sovereignty. So it's not only focused on resources and the grabbing of resources, but it's also grabbing of sovereignty, the possibility to decide to define their own values, our own values, our own understanding and wishes. And life projects is also proposed. So this is a concrete example by that MAPI developed. It's working with the agroecological gardens in the affected areas, saying, okay, governments, companies, you want to build here and then you want to submerge this land, but we show you that we can live out of these gardens. This is a living territory and we want to stay here. This is the base of our existence, so we will not move out. And in Colombia also, they are setting up these agroecological spirals, espirales agroecológicas. And this way, they try to scale up and out with other communities, other affected communities, and go viral.
As a procedure.
Yeah. And the second force, the second transformative force is saying, hey, we are not only affected by this project, we are affected by the model. So how to learn to be affected by this model? So it's not only about the project, but an overall energy model is affecting us. So one key element is to go beyond this dichotomy of urban-rural. So urban are those who benefit from this project, and the rural people are the dispossessed, by saying, hey, energy poverty is also a result of the energy model. So we have to build these alliances between urban communities and non-urban and rural communities. One other pillar is alliances with workers and unions. If we want to build like a people's energy project, like build another model for the state, for the country, we need to work with the people who are also technologically also more aware of how machines work, etc., and how we can build together with them, how can we make them our ally and build with them a different model. And the third transformational force, to my understanding, is a more inclusive space for women and children also to participate. And these are 2 examples, one again from Mab in Brazil, and one is from India and Central India. So from food, energy, and water are not commodities, they also added women are not commodities. So to dismantle this patriarchal system that is behind the sustains, underpins this type of energy model. And there are different ways to work also the repression, the violence that women also suffer. And this is an example, the one that you maybe see here. It's a little small, but it's a work with the Abyyalas, which are like broader works for working together in duelo colectivo, so the collective mourning. So we need to find a place together, like a space, a protected, intimate space for exposing what we felt and what we experienced as women in affected territories, race of violence, etc., etc. And one other thing is how we can include children also in this debate. So it's an important sector of our society. So both in India, for example, the Narmada Bachao Andolan created the Jiva Shalas. They are schools of life, literally translated. So these are schools run by the movement in the affected territories, where the government, the state, just stopped financing or supporting public services and schools. So they run their own schools with their own, with the themes and topics that are most useful for them, not with the state program, right? We say, okay, we need to know our plans, we need to know how the energy model works and why we are affected, for example. So children can also participate in the debate. And the same MAB in Brazil is also trying to do with the Cirandas, schools for activist children, let's say. They also have to learn to be affected and understand why also families are split apart or parents are also facing lots of tensions and stress. If you give me 30 more seconds, it's just a sum up. So three main shifts that I think it's important and interesting to highlight. One is shifting the focus from only resource grabbing to sovereignty grabbing, and how we can, with movements, re-weigh together different sovereignties, so across the sectors. And of course, and this would inevitably lead to questioning development, questioning modernity, etc., etc. The second one, second shift is from understanding ourselves as project affected to model affected. And this will bring us to scaling up and scaling out our alliances. And then the shift from natural resources to commons and relations. So not only understanding water, energy, land, food as natural resources, but understand them as commons and as a way to build relationship of trust and collaboration between us, members of the community, and with other communities. And to be more inclusive plural ontologies and epistemologies, how we learn about these things. So yeah, engaging in plural vision, worldviews, and ways of knowing. And that's it.
That's right, yeah. I think we all should try. Change the book, maybe. Okay, so I think I have 1 minute before we go into the discussion. I'm going to be brief. Just want to bring a few synthesizing insights from a project that Gustavo Garcia Lopez from the University of Puerto Rico and myself have been working for the last year and a half, trying to understand interaction synergies between environmental justice conflicts and community-based natural resource management. Everything started when we went to the Yaqui Valley in Sonora, Mexico, with a project to understand the ability of irrigation communities to cope with droughts. And as we got there, we were hit by a blockade. Many irrigators belonging to different irrigation communities protesting against the construction of an aqueducto, water transfer that would bring water from their part of their valley downstream to the coastal area. Many of these irrigators were part of the Yaqui tribe, which may sound familiar to some of you. What we found in that trip is that this Yaqui tribe were being very active in acting collectively against the aqueduct. And then they were not doing very well in self-organizing to manage the war that they were trying to defend. Of course, they are not to blame for that. There's a long political economy history that needs to be studied, but this struck us because we thought, wow, we came here to study how they self-organize internally, and then we see how they are organizing to fight against what we could call an environmental justice threat. So that was the start. So we decided to do a meta-analysis of 83 studies that would give us information about these overlapping phenomena. Self-organized communities that are organizing also to fight against threats. One of the first insights we got from there is that they are fighting against a diversity of threats. In yellow, sort of, we have the usual suspects. What Roger was, I think, referring when he talked about the accumulation or the accumulators. Large-scale, intensive users in the form of extractive industries, but also timber companies, water transfers to urban users, industrial users, fishing trawlers, and so on, but also smaller users, commercial users, and more heterogeneous users that are coming from outside and do not know a lot about how things are managed in the communities. I think Giselle was referring to that. The small-scale users also make a difference and can constitute a threat. But we also found that threats are driven by another powerful set of actors, which are governments. Governments issue two main kinds of policies: resource management policies and economic policies, sort of. They decentralize when they are actually re-centralizing. They issue very severe restrictions to communities on behalf of conservation and the nature, based on scientific conclusions and so on. But they also issue regulations that liberalize the resources and allow for privatization. And of course, concession systems that are a gateway for, again, giving the resources to private hands. We also found some drivers around the failed restitution of rights after decolonization and political restrictions. Those are very much related. An important aspect related to the threats is that they usually come in compounds. They do not usually come isolated. And this example is coming precisely from the Yaqui conflict, paper written by Lucero Radoni. Yeah. So here we can see that the Independencia Aqueduct, which could be understood as one of those large-scale projects, cannot be understood if we don't look at the larger political economy or legislation that allow for water to be economic good, open to privatization and market transactions, and assign a role to the state to allow the rules of the market to reallocate water towards higher value and more efficient users. And at the same, we cannot understand the whole story without looking at who is getting the water, the large users. In this case, the urban and industrial users in Hermosillo, the big city, thriving city in the coastal area downstream the Yaqui River. Another insight has to do with the impacts. So we have drivers, but then how are they impacting in our, what we wanted to look at, the commons management or the community-based natural resource management systems. So in green here, you can see that, well, many of the impacts are directed directly to the resource themselves. So we see what we could call externalities in economic terms, in the form of scarcity, but also in the form of degradation and pollution. Mining companies is a classic example of pollution in the water, correct? But we also see big trawlers leaving less fishers for artisanal fishers. Another usual suspect is the restriction in rights. we see in many cases a total dispossession of access rights. But also we see, so this would be very much connected to privatization processes, but we also see partial restrictions in the form of restrictions to harvesting rights, also restrictions to self-organization and management. These impacts will be very much related to conservation policies and natural resource management, also for scientific management, I mentioned before. And we also have impacts in the form of socioeconomic impacts. So communities, many communities lose their sources of livelihood, but also the organizations also lose the sources of income because of that as a second sort of iteration of those impacts. And also cultural and traditional knowledge erosion. I won't get much in detail. So there is some diversity, but you can see also groups within. And again, probably the message to pass on here is that the impacts also come in groups or compounded. It's not that we only see one impact. This is coming from a paper by Butcher and what's her name? Benita. This has to do, correct me if I'm wrong, with basically a state-promoted irrigation development project. So here we can see not only how the state seemed to impose some way of doing things over community boundaries in the community organizations, peasant families, customs, and knowledge, but also set very arbitrarily and totally discounting locals the zones that would be benefited by the irrigation project. So we see here some sort of dispossession and here some sort of cultural erosion or traditional knowledge erosion. Just to finish, we were interested in looking at how these communities organize to fight against those threats, participating of or actually creating from scratch environmental justice movements. And we wanted to see how they impact on governing the commons or community-based natural resource management. So we looked at whether any of Ostrom's design principles, which you may be familiar with, were affected by environmental justice movements. I won't get into detail to this graph. I just wanted to point your attention to the second principle, the principle of proportionality, that says, well, we are going to tend to see communities managing more sustainably the resources if the rules they design to manage those resources are proportional, meaning that the costs of the users to follow the rule are balanced with the benefits of following those rules. That doesn't speak a lot about justice, I would say, but there's a little bit of a sense of fairness. What we found in our study is that by looking at the role of environmental justice movements, we can add dimensions to that idea of proportionality that we think, or pathways, if you want, through which the communities can get to that proportionality. So we found that environmental justice movements can promote change in the distribution of benefits from resource use. Classical example is fishing communities fighting for higher quotas. So we've seen many countries around the world, governments imposing fishing quotas. So the environmental justice movements here will play a role in getting a better quota for the communities. We see the movements also trying to add value to community-based natural resource management in the form of economic cooperatives or economic ventures. We see this in the forest sector a lot, creating timber cooperatives and so on. And we also see the movements framing resource access and use as a matter of justice. And we've seen this pretty much a lot in the water context. So water is not an economic good that should be defended through historical rights to it, but it's a right. It's a human right, and it doesn't matter whether you have local rights than I do, formal rights. It matters that you, as a human, has rights. So just some concluding remarks. We've seen compounding environmental justice threats and impacts on both the physical and social institutional commons. And maybe there's an interest in looking at those threats and impacts from a pathway perspective, so how they emerge and interact with each other, creating or jeopardizing community-based natural resource management and creating injustice situations. And we see that environmental justice movements can have a positive impact on community-based natural resource management. And I haven't touched on it, but some of those positive impacts go beyond the specific threats that motivate the emergence of the movements. So I think that's all. Thank you.
This one?
I don't know.
All right, thank you all for this amazing presentations, and I hope you don't expect me in 5-10 minutes to summarize. Even more.
This is normal, don't worry, we don't even.
All right. So, because I was supposed to give a general also summary for some people who maybe are watching remotely, but I'm going to assume that most of you already have seen, listened to the presentations. I'll go very briefly and then to some points that I thought maybe interesting for discussion and then open for, I'm sure there are many people interested in many questions will come from the floor, right? Well, I want to briefly mention that, well, starting from Rutger, Rutger came with a very, the foundations of this discussion about how water, maybe I think what I find interesting in general is how water can be this central resource that can converge many different struggles and many different issues. And bringing water to the center might really help to bring different disciplines, but also different perspectives to try to understand where those different aspects meet. So about the justice aspect also brings those issues together. So I think this is a very good approach that can help all of us. I'm not sure, but I feel that all of us recognize some of those aspects mentioned by Rutger that comes from our context, our study. So, and I think we saw that in all the presentations, because interesting enough that each presentation has a different context of water issues coming from dam aspects or coming from the small scale mining and struggles and coming from the urban or the privatization of water. Where is the water? Here, yes. And now trying to understand also from the aspects of this mining issue or mobilization in Mexico that started the whole discussion that you're trying to understand social science, social movements and collective action. So I would like just to briefly bring some of elements that I found interesting in each presentation. The presentation on the mining, small scale mining, for example, I find it fascinating the aspect that mining, this brings this contradiction of being the problem and the victims, but also the idea that they depend on that. So that doesn't fit very well in this framework, that you say, that you presented. And I find it very interesting because you need to open this black box. This is a black box that I think has a lot of conceptual implications for us to dig into and try to understand. That reminds me of the case of slash and burn agriculture in the tropics. So I think it brings also other kinds of activities that suddenly something that is considered the lifestyle and that brings the activities becomes like a problem. and they are to blame the victims to what's going on. And at the same time, you have a big agribusiness growing there, but the problem is the slash and burn culture. So I think that also to bring the context of the small scale in the context of what's going on in the bigger picture. So it's a way to invisibilize, those issues and to try to minimize the problems of the large scale, because the small scale is technically not good enough. So we need to modernize, right? So I think this is a very interesting point for discussion. The second aspect, I like very much the presentation on Barcelona, because I think it's really shocking to see the difference, how suddenly we are, also for us as researchers, that we're doing research everywhere, and suddenly we realize that we should actually look around and see what's going on in our own garden, right? So I think this is already one interesting aspect of this presentation. But I think the aspect of the alliance also reminds me very much on a case that I'm studying actually now in Brazil, that's called the Water Alliance, and it's around the water crisis, and brings different actors together, bringing also technical staff together. And that was one of the things I was thinking when Rutger was presenting about the Water Alliance, the Water Justice Network. To what extent there is a possibility or an intention to bring more this progressive technical staff, people working in the government, progressive, or people who, not only the ones who left because they don't fit in, but the ones who are still there struggling, and to see how they can somehow make this bridge and make some changes from within. So this is, I think, another aspect that should be looked into it. Yeah, and moving to the third case, there are a few more things I could say, but not don't have. The water, the urban and urban-rural connection that also is brought in the dam case, which I think I can already link both of them, because this is also part of the research that I'm doing. The map. I'm glad that you talk about the anti-dam movement in Brazil, because in fact, this was the movement that was first in the 80s. The first boom of the hydroelectric power plant, they were there, and they were much more diverse. They were much more around these multifaceted issues. And then came in the 90s the ethnic-oriented territorial rights, and that split many of these groups that were all working together. Then they went for each one for their own card. I'm indigenous, I'm a rubber tapper, I'm a riverine. So the recognition was very important. This is one of the dimensions. But they played against also the groups, because they were trapped into this recognition politics, and now they are going back to the basics. So they are trying to create alliances again around different identities, because the issue is this common threat that everyone is going. So I think this is a very interesting aspect, and I'd like to hear more about this case in the future. And finally, Sergio, we've been discussing a lot about this issue. One thing that I'd like to also link is when you say those people that were together, they're trying have this social movement or this mobilization together, but they are not doing very well at the local level. That reminds me also the issue of the fragmentation of communities, because the ones that we see are the ones who are there, but we don't see the ones who are not there. The ones that back home actually are in favor with the mining, the ones who are actually employed by the mining, the ones who don't really want, they are not in favor of the social mobilization. So those ones we don't see. So if we study just the social mobilizations, just the ones who are making the noise, we are missing a big chunk of the social processes that are happening, taking place in the communities. So I think this is the gap maybe that we tend to go to where the noise is, but we forget to focus where the silent people are and what they are doing, why they are silent, and what kind of perceptions they have. So I think this is a kind of the gap that we should look at when you see the local or collective action issue, more local, site-based, and the social movement in the larger scale, moving more to the broad scale. So I think this is the key points. I have a lot more, but I'm going to stop here and open for questions. And I happen to be the chair now. I forgot about that, so I stay here. And I'll put my chair hat now. And I'm going to get the questions. Those who have questions, please raise your hand, or remotely, who is there, would like to also ask questions. Maybe you can just write your questions, and we'll pass the questions to the presenters and start the debate. Yes. I'll present yourself, make quick, brief questions, and then I'll go ask a few questions, and then I'll pass for a round. So, yes, please.
Thank you, everyone. Those were very interesting presentations. My name is Rebecca. I'm from the University of Toronto. And my question is specifically about the Barcelona case. I was hoping that you could maybe tell us a little bit more about the model of social control that you're kind of working towards. So we talk about these observatory agencies, you can maybe tell us a little bit more about how we can.
Yeah, not a lot really, but a little bit. Oh, maybe more questions?
Yes, yeah, please. So can you hold and then have a few questions, and then we do, I think it's more effective that way. Any other questions? Yeah. Yes.
In this case, I would like to know why the referendum was rejected by the left party.
Oh, I had to comment on that. Okay, any other questions for now? Yeah.
I have a question for Giselle. You were talking about mining as a tool to defend autonomy. Interesting. I was thinking about how these local miners also depend on other scales and powerful actors, for example, this black markets to get mercury, or maybe they are controlled by other big private companies, so it's not so on a small, really small scale. So what is behind? For the presentation of Barcelona, I was wondering to what extent the municipalities really want to get re-municipalized, or are there some actors in the municipality who want to stay collaborating with the private companies? So is there resistance also inside the municipality of tension? For Daniela, I was wondering just a precision, a detail on this data. You showed disaggregated data, and you showed that there is more criminalization in non-indigenous regions. I was a bit curious about this, and not so much in indigenous. Do you have an explanation for that, maybe? And for the last presentation of Sergio, just maybe what is the database of the environmental justice movements you are studying? Are they local, transnational? And also, I was a bit curious about most of the impacts on the commons are positive and not so negative. So, what's the reason?
All right. I just wanted, to see there are questions from remote.
Yeah, there are two questions from remote. One is about the book presentations. It's are there any contributions on Pakistan in the series? And the other one is regarding your presentation. I'm interested in the idea of struggles for recognition in water justice. What forms of struggles normally occur in researched areas?
Okay, I think we have a nice set of questions. So what I would like to do to go to the order of the presenters, and if you could do briefly, then we can have another round.
Well, there is no case specifically about Pakistan, but many cases that, let's say, deal with similar topics that are going on in Pakistan. So it will also be interesting for those people who are interested in Pakistan. About the second question, there are many struggles for recognition going on in water-related justice movements and communities and so on. Some are being led by the more conventional actors, recognition always means to recognize again, and therefore the issue of recognition. So recognition also may be very dangerous, and that's a topic I did not mention specifically. Recognition may also misrecognize, and that's a very powerful strategy we detail in the book, how to misrecognize, how to use recognition politics and policies in order to recognize people's rights in the way governments would want to have them recognized, represented. Against, and then let's say, for example, Charles Hale talked about the issue of how to recognize people in such a way that they are convenient, that they fit the system. The permitted indio permitido. At the other hand, there are many struggles going on in order to recognize people as they see themselves. And I think those are transformative claims which ask for redistribution of natural resources, which ask for identities being recognized that do not fit the system. I think those two types of struggles should be analyzed far more in detail.
All right, let's follow Giselle.
Thank you for the question. Yes, there are illegal actors that control mining settlements. It's true. Some miners live under conditions of servitude and slavery, even, which I think makes it more important to understand this issue. I believe that, this is my particular sense here, I believe that the risk to frame this debate around the legal-illegal divide obscures the actual reality that happens in place, the unequal relations in the field where miners are exploited under block networks of large-scale capital. And this legal-illegal divide also leads to flawed policies. So we have at least more than 2 decades of formalization policies that have addressed this debate around the binaries and formal, informal, legal, and illegal. And so far, there have not been really good results. We have 70% miners just informal after many decades of investment from the World Bank. But I believe that the terms of the debate are not necessarily the adequate ones. I believe that talking about formal, informal, legal, and illegal actually obscures the case, which is that poor people work in this business. And there are some illegal actors that will benefit from this messy, unknown territory. Yes, I would say that to you. So I'm not saying that illegality doesn't happen, it happens, but asserting that it happens does not answer the problem, does not solve the main problem.
Well, Miriam?
Yeah. Regarding the model of participation that is being built in Terrassa, it's been not presented yet. They are still negotiating with the city council, and it's going to be presented on the 7th of June, so in 2 weeks. But the idea is to create an observatory outside from the city council and from the public company, composed by civil society, different actors. They have like made a prospection of all the sectors that should be included in this observatory. So we have from the education sector, teachers, also secondary teachers, but also university actors, and taking advantage of that, I make a call because they are trying to build a table of research in Catalonia, also in Terrassa, to try to explore, possibilities of collaboration between university actors. Also because we think we need that coordination in university from researchers that are related to public policies or water somehow, because private sector is really well organized because of money, no? But I like it a lot, that image from chaos and order, because I think it repeats all the time, and also in university. And all types of actors. I don't really have the detail, but the idea is to have like 30 persons, no, this observatory, trying to do also studies, trying to propose policies, trying to somehow interact with the strategic decisions from the company, from the public company. Not from all decisions, because you cannot follow up with the everyday management of water, but yes, once a year when the tariffs are decided, you can have an evaluation of that, but it's not really done every year, and we have that approved by plenaries who in Catalonia don't know whether they are accepting. So maybe at that point, no, approval of tariffs, planification of next investments, no, these strategic issues that can be somehow participated by an organ, an observatory, and try to make proposals, and also having an idea of an holistic idea. No, they are working also in a program with schools in Terrassa, so it's quite a nice work. Once that it's presented, yeah, if you're interested, then we can share it. About the consultation, the referendum. There were two arguments from the left. One was water is a right and it should not be consulted, because otherwise we will start making consultations about public education, public sanity, whatever, everything. So it's dangerous to start consulting everything. And another one was the disequilibrium of strengths. No? If you confront Akbar on a referendum in Barcelona, they have so much money than us. So it was really a challenge to win that consultation, because even the people doesn't know. On the other side, there were some challenges, but theoretically, the idea was that to reject the consultation. On the practical way, we believe there was also an issue of local politics, no? Trying to make opposition to the political party who was supporting the referendum. Yeah, and the last one, the resistance of actors in the municipalities. Yes, of course, conservative parties are resisting to this municipalization because of the relation to the private company. But also, once it's decided by the parties, I think there is an internal work with civil servants who have been not working, because when you externalize water, then you forget about that. So there is a process with civil servants to empower them and also try to do things different. And that is also a challenge that I think that they are having.
Thank you. Let's see, Daniela. Ask everyone to be brief so we can have another round.
I'll be very brief. So the data just suggested that criminalization is higher where non-indigenous, where indigenous peoples are not involved, and repression, and violent repression is more violent where indigenous peoples are involved. So it suggests that violence has a higher occurrence where indigenous territories, whereas criminalization is more the strategy in other contexts. So, violence is more like, it's easier perpetrated against indigenous people.
All right, Sergio.
So the database, we did the database by collecting articles. So we did a search, and we selected the articles based on information available. So we wanted to have information about how the communities are organized to manage the resources, and information about the conflict and how the community has mobilized. So we didn't select on the scale of movement. So we have both local collective actions that we could understand as small movement or emerging movement, and as well like very large movements like the MST or Chiapas movement and so on. And negative impacts. So we didn't find a lot, and that may reflect a bias in the scholarship, of course. But we have some anecdotal examples. For example, we saw that there, in some cases, movements tend to impose solutions to the communities. The MST movement, it's a well-known case. Once they got their settlements, they proposed, but they ended up imposing an organizational structure to the settlements and the cooperatives that did not work. They were smart enough to rectify and do it differently. We also see movements in that attempt, like every movement, to expand the conflict and create sort of frames that are appealing to the public at large, to reduce a lot and simplify a lot the reality of the communities. We see that in fishing movements in India, where the whole claims have been reduced to the slogan of approving a seasonal ban to fishing. And they got it. And once they got it, they realized that things were more complicated than that, and it was counterproductive. We've also seen the movement, so internal conflicts in the movement that will undermine gender equality. So I think it was in Bolivia, I don't recall very well, but there was a dialectic between should we focus on getting collective rights, even if that undermines the empowerment of women, or should we actually fight for both at the same time? So yes, we found a number of those, and that's actually one of the richest or more interesting parts of this, because those, at least within our community, would tend to be rather unexpected.
Okay, I think we are very close to the time, so I would like to ask those who haven't asked any question yet, if you have any question. So start with Maria.
Okay. So nice to meet you. Thank you, everyone. My name is Maria. I'm from Brazil, a geographer. And my dissertation is about the impacts of a mega dam in Brazilian Amazon. It's Dam Monte Dam on riverain territories and people. So I was wondering if you can share if both network, water justice and environmental justice network have a plan to be stronger in Brazilian Amazon, and where, and which kind of movement and articulations as we concentrate, protect areas by their traditional people and mega infrastructure projects. So we have a lot of environmental conflicts around. And I was wondering also if you can share, if you all can share more information about compensatory and mitigating measures around this kind of water justice struggles. So in particular, if you have more information about the position of movements against dams.
All right, any other question? Yes.
I had one comment. Great papers, thanks for sharing that. I have a question about, for maybe, about the infrastructure question. How do you educate people about very complex and difficult engineering works and infrastructures? It seems like that's a key element to get people involved in assuming control over water, is to get people that know the right infrastructure. That's the first challenge. And then the other part about infrastructure is when you're thinking about accumulation, which is a great point. Infrastructures can accumulate water in a certain way, capture it and store it, but there's also these infrastructures there's a whole dynamic of capital moving through them as well, huge expenditures, long-term investments. So there's these two things going on. One is the control of water, and then the other is sort of the flow of capital through the actual physical infrastructure. So I guess my question is about, I don't know if that's a question, about infrastructure in general, like the role of infrastructure.
Yes, one last question, then we have one question from the community.
Yeah. So I have a comment or question for Daniela. I like very much the three sheets that you proposed by the end of your presentation. I think you have a nice new areas illuminated now, and that you can now theorize and operationalize as well. And I was thinking of this idea of sovereignty. And it's also very controversial, especially in Catalonia. And I was thinking, okay, so we know very well the food sovereignty movement now in Catalonia we have the energy sovereign network. Interestingly, I haven't heard about water sovereignty yet. So this security was adjusted. So I don't know, I guess my question is like, is it about like the cognitive capacity of making decisions of it, or I don't know.
Okay, last questions coming from remote.
Is there a particular ethical tradition on which the Justicia Hídrica, water justice series, draws their conception of justice? I'm particularly interested in whether there is an explicit or implicit role for the golden rule in the conceptions of justice, something emphasized by Vincent Ostrom in addressing collective promise.
Okay, in the last round we have very complex questions that can take a lot of time. So what I'm going to ask you is those who were directly asked a question, but the ones who are not also would like to say a few words briefly, then everyone has a chance to say something, but please be really brief. We're running out of time. So let's start quickly another round. If you have something to say or if you want to skip, it's fine. Yeah. Good.
My last question, the Justicia Hídrica Alliance network is open and it's open to other people, scholars, students, institutions who want to work, let's say, from a shared, committed perspective to work on the issues of water injustices. So yes, we would be very much interested in working more with. I think your question is about the Amazon areas. So some people already work on that, and we also discussed this in the morning. The Peruvian Amazon, for example, as you said, have been working on the Ecuadorian Amazon. Other PhD students have been working on that. The oil companies, forestry companies, and so on. But yes, indeed, and it's not just for the Amazon area, but it can also be other areas who occasionally or more permanently come to work, let's say, with the Alliance. It's open, and so it's welcome. I think the other question was for Daniela.
Yeah, well, and same also from us. Yeah. And you also asked about the compensation issue, and this long debate and quite well developed, I would say. I mean, it's very rich in reflections. For example, in question unified, the compensation is usually, I mean, by governments is usually recognized only to those who have entitlement land, for example, have legal entitlements. All of this, sure, but yeah, I think this is a super relevant question that we're posing. And we can discuss more if you want. And about sovereignty, that's a hard question. Yeah, I also asked myself the same question, and also looked up and Googled like, is there any water sovereignty debate going on there? And I think, I mean, to my understanding, sovereignty is very much applied by. Interestingly, it's mostly used from the global south, let's say. Other countries rather prefer to talk about energy democracy. So I think it really has to do with redefining what sovereignty means. I mean, beyond national boundaries and beyond the idea of states, so the classical understanding of sovereignty. And to me, one very interesting insights came from Domingo, a Mayan leader in Guatemala, and he said something like, for us, for the Mayan community, sovereignty means that you exist because the others exist. So we are sovereign in our territory because other people are sovereign in their territory. So I understand it's more like a sort of relational sovereignty, and which I think it's nice to have a way to think around and develop more. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, you want to say something? Okay. I'm going to give a chance also for Ian and Giselle if you have something that you'd like to say briefly, and then I'll pass to Sergio.
Just
as a reaction. So in the end of my presentation, I didn't have enough time to give the full picture about where I was going, so I will take this as a chance to finish that idea. Okay, so we have the idea of the hydrosocial cycle, right? Which stresses that there is not such a thing as water flowing naturally in different shapes and material shapes. There is human intervention. However, this concept does not question that the cycle itself is broken, and that's where I was worried on top literature, because human intervention allows for things that flow, like capital and water, but also things that accumulate as a result of these flowing processes, like accumulation of capital, but also accumulation of pollution. And I think we can understand that in the case of mining, artisanal mining that I'm seeing now, when we change the scale of the research. So when we stop focusing on this miner is polluting right now water with mercury, and we start seeing that there is a global chain of gold production, that the gold that comes from these places that are under extreme harsh conditions end up in the London bullion market and are sold formally. When we change the scale, we can see that there are certain places where capital accumulation happens, certain places that suffer the consequences of capital accumulation. So that was a bit of the broad idea I wanted to present here today. Changing the scale of the research.
About the education on complex or complicated infrastructure, what we think is that we need to make it less complex, that we need infrastructure serves a purpose, and that is what we need to establish, to work on education, to establish priorities and participation, to make people participate establishing priorities, and then once you have set up the priorities, you can decide which infrastructure, and that maybe is a technical decision. But if you let the private sector or administrations who are not working and fiscalizing the sector to decide which infrastructure, what's happening in Catalonia is that when the contract finishes, and then the company comes and say, you need this infrastructure because you need a new tank or you need whatever, and the city mayor says, okay, we cannot pay it, so I extend the contract. So what we need to do is to make plans to set up these priorities, and then we will see which infrastructure a technical will advise us to make. But first, try to recover sovereignty. And I am going to enter this one sentence on that, because when we think about that, we are also between sovereignty and democracy, but from the perspective of municipalities. Because what we have been lost here is the sovereignty or the democracy from the municipalities in front of this power from the private sector.
Thank you. Sergio?
I don't think I need to address any questions, but
the one about
I think I'm going to basically pass it on to someone else, because I'm certainly not the only one to talk about water justice, but I would like to basically reformulate it. It comes from Anas Malik from Shabelle University in Cincinnati, and he was interested in knowing, I guess particularly from those who've been working on the water justice book, on which basis or conceptual basis they talk about water justice. I won't believe you if you tell me that you didn't have debates about what is justice and how it manifests in the water context. So maybe you can just quickly reflect on those conversations you may end up having.
Well, I guess we'll have bibliography. No. Obviously, let's say the water justice network, the Justicia Pública Alliance, is very broad, diverse, heterogeneous. There is not one conception of what water justice is. What we do want to do is study, let's say, all the positivist, but also constructivist
theories that have been invented in history about what justice is, how that relates to water governance. And we will not come up with one answer, it should be done this way. That's what we want to avoid. We want to understand how people feel, experience injustices in the field, in practice, in all the water governance contexts, and then take that as a starting point. And then, yes, we can relate it to different theories from different justice authors. We also criticize many of those authors in, for example, the first chapter. Basically, also it's possible that many of the researchers and scholars, students, activists within the network have different ideas about what water justice is and how it should be perceived and how it should be struggled for. And that is precisely the debate. So what we want to do is not give definitive, positive answers, it should be done in this way, but rather start asking, okay, what are the most important critical questions towards those fixed justice theories? How do fixed water laws work in practice? How do they not recognize, let's say, those practices which are in the field? And how can we collectively construct new ideas about water injustice and water justice? I don't know if Tom wants to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the way that we approach it in the book, and again, I'm sorry, I had to just look through the bibliography thing, because we do sort of draw on a lot of the sort of classic theorists from Locke and Sen and Nancy Fraser and many others, and Rawls, and we sort of work through, just beginning with the really most basic concepts of what justice, how justice has been conceptualized. So thinking about distributional justice, institutional justice, theories of recognition, theories of capacity, so drawing on Amartya Sen, but also again with a very critical eye towards that those provide a certain conceptual framework which is really useful, but that's sort of a beginning of a conversation. It's not the end of the conversation. And I think one of the things, I mean, at least in the way that I conceptualize it, in the way that I think debates over the years have taken place, is thinking about justice as sort of ongoing and very contingent and situational struggles, right? That there isn't a single, as Rupert said, there isn't a single sort of situation or conceptualization of justice. And I think one of the sort of inherent contradictions of this, one of the things that makes it quite messy, is that justice for some groups at some scales may represent injustice for others, right? If we think about the case of dams and renewable energy, I mean, again, I would say almost nobody would argue against renewable energy. I can think of some people from my country who would, but I think most of us or all of us in this room can understand the need for moving away from hydrocarbons as a form of energy. And yet that creates by necessity certain kinds of conflicts. If we think about most forms of renewable energy, they're very land intensive. And one great benefit that hydrocarbons has, in addition to producing a lot of energy, is that they tend to depending on how you view them, they can have a relatively smaller footprint, right? And so, if you think about, okay, well, how do we get beyond this hydrocarbon intensive economy? We begin to think about these other sorts of problematic things. And so in the last few years, I've read articles, I've seen presentations that are critiques of wind energy and solar energy and dams. So how do we kind of work through these situations at various scales? So part of the issue, I think, is that there isn't ever sort of a case of justice. There's a case of social struggle that works towards this sort of justice, which is kind of always just beyond the horizon. Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know if that helps, but I think it's sort of an ongoing struggle to kind of situate and contextualize justice as this sort of contingent set of relations.
All right. Thank you, Tom. I think with that we finish this set. Now I'm going to invite Yusuf, but one thing just I want to say before we finish. One thing that I think all of us could bring together is it is about water justice and commons. And I was thinking the whole time, what we have in every single case is that commoning processes going on in different ways. And rescaling these processes in different ways. The outscaling aspect, the urban municipal level, so maybe downscale that in some way. So we have those different aspects in order to, in this struggle, but also as Ruth pointed out in the beginning, not all collectivities are maybe for the benefits of all. So we can look at those collectivities maybe in some transformative, in some convenience, and some maybe accommodation processes. So I think what we should ask ourselves, one of the questions that connects these two aspects of water and commons, is maybe to understand the process, because water per se is not a commons, but becomes a commons as the commoning starts. Then we see what scale of commoning is taking place. So it's not, there's nothing inherited about commons of water, but it's a part of the process that materializes or becoming a deep process of coming. So I think that would be one aspect for us to think about. With that, I finish my part, and I'm going to invite Yerumbos to the final remarks. Yes.
Okay, so I'm Jeroen Vos. I work with Wageningen University, and I'm given the hard job to wrap up this very interesting and nice session. A nice afternoon. We hear a lot of concepts, a lot of very nice cases about water justice and water injustice. I think for me, what it boils down to is seeing water justice as a construction of meaning. But I think that is what I got from, let's say, all the presentations. And I think there are three elements, three dimensions to this construction of meaning. One is knowledge. We have seen maps, nice maps of where water is private and where water is publicly managed. We have seen numbers like 150 million informal small miners in the world. This is sort of knowledge that helps of understanding what's happening. There's another dimension, which is, let's say, more tacit knowledge, more, let's say, feeling, more like knowing what works and what not works, like from a social movement perspective, knowing when to protest or when to go under the radar or when to try to force alliances with government parties or government institutions and when not. This is something you learn in the process, not something you can learn from a book, but something you have to do. And then there's a third dimension to the construction of meaning of water justice. That is attitude. That is, let's say, where to look for justice and injustice and how to do that. So that is the attitude of looking for grounded experiences, being open also to things you were not expecting. It's also being aware of what information to trust and what to mistrust. There's a lot of things also you cannot learn from a textbook, but something you have to learn by doing. Just as a small illustration, also how it's not just about this idea, these three dimensions of building or constructing water justice. It's not only situations themselves, but also how they change. What stories you can tell about what change is happening. And this is an example, just briefly, when a PhD student is doing research in Ecuador on roses, rose cultivation for export. Ecuador actually is the third country in the world exporting roses. And all these roses are produced in actually a small area north of Quito in big greenhouses by very big multinational companies. And also some smallholders that copied that model and have their small greenhouses. And they all need water, and this water is brought by a very small, just locally managed canal. So this is a complex situation, and there's a lot of things going on about meaning. And actually things change. So if you look from the perspective of knowledge, you can see that less pesticides or less dangerous pesticides are being used. The average wages being paid are higher, and also, for example, the women that work in the greenhouses are protected better.
There's not spraying over their heads anymore. They are taken out of the greenhouse when there is spraying going on. A lot of things have changed. And there is actually 4 stories to be told on how this change happened. The companies themselves will say, okay, we are very responsible, we adhere to corporate social responsibility rules, there is water stewardship in these rules, we are certified third-parties by Rainforest Alliance, things like that, so we did it ourselves. Then the government comes in and says, no, we raised the minimum wage, we have all sorts of laws, and we do all sorts of inspections. So it's the government that imposed the things, these changes. And then the local environmental NGOs say, no, this would never have happened if we would not have struggled. We went to take water samples. We went to protest. We went to show that actually this is all because we mapped the meaning of what's actually happening in the flower industry, because we had the knowledge and we had the right alliances and we had the right attitude of looking for this grounded knowledge, and so we made this change happening. And then there's a fourth story to be told. That is about the local campesinos, the local people working in the fields and struggling for, let's say, water security for their potato and maize fields. They run the canal and they say, okay, we struggled to take over the canal. It's our water. Our ancestors built the canal. It's our canal. We want to tell where this water should be used for. And that was not so much against the big water users in the big rose companies, because they have their children also working in the greenhouses. But it was about being able to control the meaning of it. What does it mean to be in control of the water and where the water should be used for? Is it for subsistence agriculture? We will decide on that. Is it about making money in a greenhouse? Okay, but then we decide about it. So it was about this different stories, different meanings you can give to this change process. I think you can see that in the examples being given also, that actually the water justice thing is not fixed. There's no golden standard for water justice. It's a moving target, and you need the 3 dimensions. You need the knowledge. You have to do the research. You need the tacit knowledge, the skills to be able how to do the research, but also how to build a movement. You can find that in villages, because like Gisela was saying, one person might be classified as a miner, but she or he might also be a farmer or a fisherwoman. But also, this person might be a poet. It might be a person that can tell good stories. It might be somebody that's very interested in how legal things function. You can find those people everywhere. So this categorization is also about meaning. And there's a lot of meaning in words. Like if there's a plan and you present an alternative plan, okay, that makes it the word alternative. What does it mean? It can be very powerful. We have something else. It can also be, okay, there's the real official plan, and we have an alternative plan. We could also say it's our real plan. It's not alternative. That's the plan. So there's a lot of things in the meaning of words, and that is when to use what word. So that is this tacit knowledge. Then so just to close, I want to thank all the presenters. I think it has been a very nice afternoon. A lot of thinking and working going on. Very nice to be broadcasted live. And yeah, I hope you take on these ideas. And I think I'm sure we will continue the discussion. And yeah, but that's unfortunately for the people looking live at the broadcast or afterwards. There's drinks outside, so I'm running now. And it's thirsty all the talking and thinking. So thank you for your attention. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching us online, and we'll continue the discussion over drinks. Thank you.
Well, hi, everyone. That was a great event, and I think that a lot of you hopefully were really excited and interested and wanted to hear what they had to say. I appreciate everyone who posed a few questions online to sort of engage with our speakers. So I'd like to again thank everyone, all the event organizers and the speakers. A special thank you to Tom Pearl at Syracuse, Lubana Durate and Ricard Bollins at Wageningen, Joan Martinez at the University of Barcelona, Giselle Villa at Pontifical University of Peru, Hung Corbella at the University of Cordoba, Danielle De Bene at the University of Barcelona, Sergio Villamayor Thomas at the University of Barcelona, Fabio Castro at the University of Amsterdam, and Jerome Vos at Wageningen. Thank you, everybody, so much for your presentations. They're really great, really, really good. I know that some of the panel and International Waters Network are all on Twitter, so go ahead and look them up if you're interested. Give them a follow. Our address is at internatwaters, INTERNAT, Waters, just like it's spelled. And go follow us. We'll be happy to tweet about other activities that our network is doing, and in particular other future webinars. So if these presentations left you interested in learning some more, please go ahead and be in touch with any of the presenters. Just look them up on the internet, and they're all very friendly, all really great. So I hope you all found the insights provided by our panel about water justice in the commons just really as engaging as I did, and it gave me a lot of material to work with in my writing that I'm doing right now. So I hope it was really helpful and it generates a lot of ideas for your own work as well. So on behalf of the whole network, we'd like to thank you all for tuning in today, and have a great day. Thank you.